Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Two things to say. One, title of the video and thumbnail basically gives it away, but let's pretend that you don't see that and then get surprised when I say the same thing however long it takes for me to get to the main topic. And second, next week's podcast is going to be a Q&A episode, so if you haven't submitted any questions, by all means, go to the video where I say to suggest questions, or you can put them in the comments in this video, I don't really care. Be warned, every person gets a 10-question limit. So that way, even if not a lot of people ask questions, I'll have a decent number. With that out of the way, let's get right into the news. First, we're going to go over a good news story that happened. So there is a big win for the opposition in South Korea. Now, if you do not remember, South Korea is currently run by a conservative party, the People Power Party, and unfortunately, they did really well in the presidential election. Well, I mean, they barely won in the presidential election, and they had a decent number of people in the legislature, so they were like, uh-oh, the party was going to get a bit hefty, but now things have changed with the Democratic Alliance being able to overtake the party in the legislature. Currently, the Democratic Alliance's total seats will be 176, compared with the total of the People Power and People Future Alliance with 108 seats. The names might give a small bit of confusion, so let me explain. The Democratic Alliance is an electoral pact of 3 political parties in South Korea. Well, technically 5. It's the Democratic Party of Korea, which has kind of changed its name to the Democratic Alliance. Okay, this is weird. This is how to explain. The Democratic Party of Korea, the party of Lee Jae-myung, changed its name to the Democratic Alliance of Korea, and due to this, they also allowed other parties to join in with them as members of an alliance, which included another political alliance called the New Progressive Alliance of the Basic Income Party and the Open Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party. And controversially, another political party called the Progressive Party joined with the alliance. The reason why that party is a bit controversial is because it is the party that is considered the closest to North Korea, because it is the least hawkish on the North Korean issue. The alliance even wanted to go one step further because it wanted to include another political alliance, the Green Justice Party Alliance, which, if you remember, is the Justice Party is technically South Korea's largest left-wing political party, which was Lee Jae-myung's primary critic of the left. Now, Lee Jae-myung was already a critic of the left of his own party, but it's basically like this. It's like the Progressive Party is borderline left-wing nationalist, the Justice Party was a progressive capitalist party, and Lee Jae-myung is sort of like a progressive liberal. Basically, it's a small swallowing of the left in South Korea. And it looks like the Green Justice Party probably should have joined in with the alliance, because I'm looking at the results now. They didn't get a single seat, either in the proportional or constituent seats. So yeah, they probably could have used a little bit of that. So it seems that there's an interesting results coming in, because it looks like the left wing is actually taking hold in South Korea. And hopefully that will translate to the next presidential election. And there's also another thing that is very interesting that many people have pointed out, and it is the fact that this election is showing very clearly what a lot of people think is going on in the United States, and it is the gender gap. Now, for those of you who don't know what I mean, it's because in South Korea, there is a very large divide in the gender divide in regards to their politics. Because if you remember from the last video that I did on South Korea, I mentioned how many young men in South Korea are shifting heavy to the right. And it seems like they're maintaining this rightward shift, because they overwhelmingly voted for the conservative parties. Meanwhile, women overwhelmingly voted for leftward parties. And many people have been trying to point out that might be a thing going on in the United States, but it's a little bit more complicated down here in the US. Mostly because South Korea is a lot more monolithic, so we have to analyze, they're a bit more easy to understand in that regard. And another thing that I need to mention is, even though the left wing is starting to take a bit of hold in South Korea, it's still not as far enough, because there was this controversy with the Democratic Alliance in this election, because there was one candidate they wanted to nominate who was an LGBTQ man. He was a gay man, but they didn't want to nominate him because many of the people in that alliance still held extremely socially conservative views. So there's still a little bit of workarounds we need to get through on that front. Speaking of things to work around, here's a very interesting thing that just randomly dropped out of nowhere. It is Joe Biden has stated that he is considering Australia's request to drop the persecution of Julian Assange. That is very weird, especially considering I was making a video that just so happened to involve Joe Biden and Julian Assange, and there is a vastly different perspective in that than this. Will be very interesting to see if I have to make changes to that segment of that video. We'll have to wait and see on that regard. I will say this. If he is going to pardon Julian Assange, I do genuinely think this would be hilarious. Because so many people in the fucking Assange cult, they were clamoring hard against fucking Joe Biden, saying like, oh, one of the reasons why we can't support Joe Biden is because Joe Biden won't support Julian Assange. And it's just so fucking ironic. If he's the one who's going to end up saving Julian Assange, that'd be crazy. Speaking of saving, there are certain candidates looking to be saved in this California district. So I'm going to have to give a little bit of context for this, so let me explain. California District 16, it is a seat that is currently held by Anna Eshoo, who has announced that she's going to be retiring in the upcoming election. And as such, a lot of people stepped to the plate to try and get her seat, many of which being Democrats. And a couple of prominent names came around. Rishi Kumar, a guy who ran last time. There's Julie Licott-Hames. But the race was essentially boiling down to three people: Joe Smidian, Sam Liccardo, and Evan Lowe. These three individuals are somewhat prominent in the district. Smidian is a member of the Santa Clara Board of Supervisors. Evan Lowe is a prominent state senator or state assemblyman in the district. And Sam Liccardo is it was the most recent mayor of San Jose. And what ended up happening is, as the race went on, it was made very abundantly clear that Sam Liccardo was going to be the one who was winning the district. The question was, who was going to end up replacing him? And another question that boiled down to was, who was the best candidate in the race? Because unfortunately, we really didn't have that many good options in the race. And the only, because there's a decent number of people who have backed, some people say that Smidian is the best choice, but he's currently endorsed by Anna Eshoo. So it's he's endorsed by the incumbent, so that's a little bit of an issue. Many people, although technically, if I had to be technical, Evan Lowe seems to be the best candidate in the race, albeit he's still not the best. He's endorsed by the current lieutenant governor of California. He's got some decent backers: Becca Balint, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Mark Buchan, Jamie Raskin, Mark Takano. But he also has the endorsement of people like Richie Torres. He's also endorsed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus PAC, who, that means something. It means something. It doesn't have to mean that much, but it means something. And as the race went on, people were trying to figure out, okay, so we know Liccardo is there. Who's going to be the next candidate? There's some people who apparently whispered that Smidian have some benefits, but I haven't really seen anything indicating that he's that good. And I've heard people say that Evan Lowe isn't that good. I know that he endorsed Andrew Yang in the most recent presidential election, so it's I know he's not the best, but again, it's comparatively, he seems to be the best of the candidates. And what ended up happening, people were just trying to figure out, who was going to win, Smidian or Lowe. And what ended up happening is the race just kept getting so close to call. So okay, so what do we do now? And they just kept counting, and okay, they were waiting for the moment where the count would end up showing which candidate would end up edging out. But unfortunately, what ended up happening is that Lowe and Smidian ended up getting into a tie. And per California law, you could either call for a recount or you can do the more interesting thing and just have all three of the candidates move on to the runoff. And it looked like they were going to have all three candidates move on to the runoff because none of the candidates were going to call for a recount. But as of now, it turns out there is going to be candidates that are going to be calling for a recount because apparently allegedly Liccardo has submitted a recount petition on behalf of Evan Lowe, and Smithian has also called for a recount in his own front, which basically lets you know that they're trying to get Lowe out of the contention. So I guess that also still shows, again, he's the better of the candidates. If they're so desperate to try and get him off the ballot, well, maybe there's something worth looking into there. Anyway, speaking of things looking into, U.S. government is going to be able to continue doing some looking into stuff because the House has just passed a modified surveillance bill. It's a bill that reauthorizes the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. It's a very big bill, and there was a lot of things that happened with this bill. One of the big things that happened is that this bill is going to be shorter, because usually this bill is extended for longer periods of time, but apparently it's shorter, so should the Trump administration want to do anything in regards to this, he'd have to also pass a bill in his own right. The final vote was 273 to 147, which had 147 Republicans and 126 Democrats voting for it. And the opposition was 59 Republicans and 88 Democrats. But another thing that was interesting was that there was actually a bill that was like amendments that was put on the bill that was led by Andy Biggs and Pramila Jayapal, which would have basically extended the idea of getting a warrant before conducting any wireless surveillance. However, that ended up failing 212 to 212. And apparently a lot of people have had a lot of words to say, especially conservatives have tried to make this claim like, oh, this is bad. A lot of of the fringe far right are trying to make this claim because one of the biggest things that is currently going on right now is that they're using this as an excuse to be pro Donald Trump, because they're claiming that the reason why they're opposed to this is because FISA is looking into Trump. That allegedly the FBI and the CIA are looking into Trump. That's literally what happened. Laura Loomer literally said you see, these conservatives, they're pretending that they support Trump, but then in actuality, they supported this bill that would allow the U.S. government to illegally spy on Trump for 2024. But it's no, this isn't about Trump. Why do you keep saying this is about Trump, dude? This is so fucking stupid. That's the only reason why these guys even give a shit about this issue at all, because King Daddy Trump did crimes and he's getting punished for them. Well, actually, scratch that. He's not getting punished for them, but it's still a bad thing because I don't get it. This is the fucking weirdest thing. He's not getting punished at all because he's currently running for president of the United States, and Joe Biden can't prosecute Trump for doing anything because he's the incumbent president. And it's just I really can't believe this weird world that we live in where conservatives, and they don't even know the fact that this is one of the biggest things that was going on, because at one point it was trending, the word uniparty was trending because oh, the uniparty is doing this, because conservatives again want to pretend that they're this outsider class. It's guys, your party voted overwhelmingly for this. Remember, 147 Republicans voted for it, 126 Democrats voted for it, and in the opposition, 80 Democrats voted against it. Meanwhile, see? Notice how the trends are still this. Your party overwhelmingly voted for it, not against it. Meanwhile, the other party voted a lot more against it than for it. Anyways, let's just move on to the last story, which is a very bad thing. Lunchables contain lead. Yeah, there was just no segue for that. Apparently, Lunchables contain lead. Consumer watchdog groups like Consumer Reports had tested 12 versions of Lunchables and found relatively high amounts of lead and cadmium. Now, for those who don't know what cadmium is a chemical linked to negative effects on the kidney and skeletal and respiratory systems, and is classified as a human carcinogen by the WHO. It is also pointed out the fact that the sodium levels in the Lunchable kits range from 460 milligrams to 740 milligrams per serving, nearly a quarter to half of a child's daily recommended limit for sodium. They also contain harmful phthalates, chemicals found in plastics that can be linked to reproductive issues, diabetes, and cancer. And this is leading the charge for, like, the reason I found this was because I follow More Perfect Union, and they pointed out this fact, and I'm like, what? That's just weird. Just like, what? Especially considering I have, like, younger family members. It's like, oh yeah, they eat Lunchables a lot. It's like, what? Like, this is just so weird. Just like, what? How? But then there's this one weird thing where there are some people who want to try and dismiss this. Even people who are so-called on the left are trying their best to try and dismiss this in some capacity. Like, I saw this account, and it was randomly just like, man, I can't believe that most of what More Perfect Union posts is clickbait bullshit, and then they point out the fact that in the article that they link that to, it says that it doesn't exceed any federal limits of lead. Boy, do you not understand this? There is no safe amount of lead that can be on your system. Any amount of lead in your system is dangerous, especially if you continue to have that in your system. And I looked it up. Yes, there is a legal limit to the amount of lead in food. But then this is the biggest problem. Again, as the WHO points out, there is no safe amount of lead. So, the legal amount of lead in food should be 0, yes? Doesn't that make sense? If there is no safe amount of lead that can be in your system, why isn't there safe amount of lead why isn't the legal limit of lead in food 0? Why isn't, what? And I'm like, I wonder if that's what they're trying to point out. And it's just like, man, after seeing this, just like, fuck, dude. Because I can't fucking trust these food companies anymore. Are you crazy? Like, there's literally so many fucking things that are like, oh, fuck. There's so many fucking things in all these different food items that are just so fucking, like, just so bad for you. Like, literally, just, like, look at anything. Like, most people point out, like, aspartame has been linked to possible cancers, at least according to some studies. I mean, have you eaten anything artificial that is red or any color tertiarily related to red, like orange or pink? That has red 40 in it, and red 40 has been potentially linked to potentially causing some cancers. And I've been exclusively drinking some drinks that have red 40 in them because those are like the not sugar-filled things. The fucking nature's twist. The only safeness is that the studies about red 40 literally say that it has to be like extreme amounts of quantities. It's like I don't even know if it qualifies. I don't fucking know. Because this is the thing. It's so fucking weird. Food regulation in the fucking United States is a fucking joke. I remember I saw something. I don't remember what it is. I will try my best to put it in the video. I'll try to put it in a comment. I don't fucking know. It was from fucking Oni and G. I know, and he's not a reliable source, but it's like, I looked it up, and it's like, oh wait, that's true. It's like, there was a specific thing where it said, like, this specific food or drink item, it only had to contain it had to be within this much realm to be classified as this thing, and it was like over 200%. Like, it was a vastly larger thing, and it's like, yeah, I would assume, like, maybe, like, 5% at most, but, like, no. It's just fucking crazy. Food regulation in this country is a joke. We need like a massive overhaul of the food regulation. I think I might even make a fucking full podcast about like the whole food regulation in this country because it is a complete and utter joke. Or just try to see if John Oliver made a video on it. That would be probably way better. And honestly, the truth of the matter is like really the only way you can be healthy in the modern day society and like not have any ill effects of your food is literally just buying a bunch of just becoming completely vegan and drinking a diet exclusively of water, or move to a fucking better country that actually regulates their food better. Anyways, let's move on to the main topic of this video, and apparently hot take to have, but I did a poll of including like the 4 people that were in the shortlist, that were in the best part of the shortlist, and apparently I'm in a minority opinion here, but yes, I believe that Tulsi Gabbard is going to be Donald Trump's running mate in the 2024 election. This isn't a guess. This is what I legitimately 100% think is going to happen. Now, I know what you're thinking. A while ago, I would have laughed at that assumption as well. I would have probably said other people. Like, I mean, even in my realm of like, I don't necessarily believe in like there are a lot of people that people put into, and I don't necessarily go into that realm, but I do, like, generally, I would have thought someone completely different a while ago, but now I genuinely believe that she is the only option that he can pick. And hopefully, after going through all of the things I'm going to say in this video, you'll see why I think that. Now, first, I guess I should explain this. I should say this. As of now, there have been 13 names officially floated by the Trump campaign as potential running mates in the upcoming presidential election. People that have made it on the elusive shortlist. Because everybody wants to be on the shortlist. Every single person wants to be on the shortlist for the presidential vice presidential nomination. And as of now, there have been 13 names that have been floated as part of this elusive shortlist. Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Tim Scott, Kristi Noem, Byron Donalds, Ben Carson, Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Katie Britt, Doug Burgum, and J.D. Vance. Right off the bat, Tulsi Gabbard sticks out as a sore thumb because she is the only person on the list who isn't a Republican, allegedly. And each of those names are prominent in their own right. You've all heard each of the names on this list at this point, at one point or another. Probably of all of them, Britt is probably the one that you probably have heard the least, honestly. No, wait, was it Britt the one that did the fucking State of the Union? No, no, never mind. Yeah, but anyways, that is the elusive list that have been floated around. But that list has shrunk a little bit. So, for starters, Ron DeSantis and Sarah Huckabee Sanders have removed themselves from the running. I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders removed herself in January of this year or last year, and DeSantis basically made it abundantly clear the second that he dropped out that he was not going to immediately jump onto being Trump's running mate. Which is very weird because everybody thought that he was going to be Trump's running mate at least like a year or two ago. Literally nobody saw anybody else in the role. Even I legitimately thought there was just no one else who could fit in the role. And then the list got even shorter because Trump himself has removed Vivek Ramaswamy from contention, which leaves 10 more people: Gabbard, Scott, Noem, Donalds, Carson, Rubio, Stefanik, Britt, Burgum, and Vance. And for various different reasons, you could remove any of these contenders. In fact, some would probably argue that Tulsi should be the next one removed due to various things, particularly not being a Republican. But I don't think so quite yet. But first I want to mention this. Like, a lot of people have kind of noticed this part. A lot of the people on this list are women and people of color. Literally, of the remaining people on the list, there is only 2 quote-unquote white guys left. 3 if you want to count Rubio. And that is a very big point for the Trump campaign. Like Bernie and Biden of yesteryear, they're making a very big point to, like, Trump or his campaign himself has stated that they want a woman or a black person to be the nominee, which is why many of these people are there. And the reason why is pretty obvious. They want to shake off the notion that the Republican Party is racist or sexist by having a woman or an African-American person to be their shield. And a lot of these choices make sense in a lot of regards. And some make no sense in some regards. Like, I mean, I'll just say this. Carson really seems like an old school idea. Like, it really seems weird that Carson is in this contention because nobody's heard or cared about Ben Carson for a long period of time. And yet all of a sudden he's in the front running to be the fucking vice president. Which makes sense considering he was the first Republican presidential candidate to bow the knee to Trump. So it makes sense that he would be the first to be contended for this position. In fact, I even went so far as to think I thought that he was going to be the vice presidential nominee in fucking 2016. Regardless, let me explain some reasons why I think some other people in this final list are going to be taken out. And apparently, there was a bit of a hot take that I didn't include Stefanik in the poll, because many people thought that Stefanik was going to be the person who a lot of people really think Stefanik is going to be the VP nominee. I don't know much about her specifically, but I think she doesn't have a chance because of one big thing. The House has a slim Republican majority, and it is a very rocky Republican majority. Remember, the most recent guy, Gallagher, I think his name was, he said that he was resigning, and he resigned to the point where they can't fill his seat until the election in November. And him and Buck have stated that their resignations are coming, like there are a couple more resignations that might be coming up in the upcoming time. So I would assume that the Republicans don't want to have less members of their House majority in the chambers. They want as many people there as they can get. And Trump understands this because he has tried to help the Republicans in office before. Like, many people like to make this notion that Trump and the mainstream Republican Party are like so angry and they hate each other so much. It's like, not really. They've been helping each other a lot in a lot of periods of time. Remember, there are many times where they would ask Donald Trump to endorse a person that they liked, but he didn't, specifically so that they could help him. Like, they basically worked out a deal where he would endorse certain candidates that they liked. Remember, in the Alabama Senate race, there was Roy Moore versus Luther Strange, and they got Trump to back Strange over Moore, despite the fact that Moore was a very hardline, perfect candidate for Trump. I wanted to include some other examples, but I didn't necessarily know exactly which ones would be specifically correct examples. I think there have been a couple of times where there have been people who are of the Trump wing, and then they basically Trump, we need your help to keep this guy in office. So he'll do that to try and stave off some primary challenges. Especially if Trump wants a especially considering a lot of the people in the House that are going to be put into contention are Trump loyalists. Why do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't part of the shortlist? Because he doesn't want her to not be in the House chambers. He wants her to do all of his bidding in the chamber. And I think he wants the same thing to happen to Stefanik and Donald. I think he wants them to stay in to keep doing what they can do in the House majority for whatever time they have left in it. Especially considering, as I was recording this, a poll was released that showed Byron Donalds as the frontrunner for Florida governor in 2026. I'm pretty sure Florida Republicans are going to be trying to pressure Donald Trump to not have him as the VP nominee, just so he can continue and move forward with that bid. Although, granted, I think you could see the idea that maybe he would do that so that Gates would have a chance to be the governor nominee, but I don't necessarily know if that's... I think, again, they want to do the path of least resistance. And on that same vein, let's talk about this. Trump doesn't want anybody who's busy, anybody who's doing anything at the moment. He wants someone who can dedicate as much time as they can to this race. He wants someone who can attend every single rally he goes to, attend their own separate rallies about the nomination process, give speeches on talk show hosts wherever and whenever he can do it, and wants to do so many of these things. He wants to do all of this stuff. If you are an incumbent government official, I think you're kind of screwed in that regard, because they'd have to dedicate all this time to their current government jobs, whether it be Senate, governor, or House. A House especially, they want to do that. Senate, I could see them maybe kind of going a little bit out there in that regard. I mean, governors, that's a bit open. Governors can probably be a lot more open than before. I mean, remember, Mike Pence, I think, was still the incumbent governor when he was nominated as vice president. But I think the GOP in each of these areas would want their government officials to remain focused on their current jobs as opposed to getting these jobs and moving them somewhere else. And I think some of this is me trying to be smarter for the Trump campaign than they probably are. But it's in that same token, that's why Hillary Clinton didn't choose Sherrod Brown to be her Senate nominee, to be her vice presidential nominee. Why she chose Tim Kaine? Because Tim Kaine was in a deeper blue seat. There was going to be less of a problem in that regard. I think they had a Democratic governor at the time. So if there was an appointment that had to happen, it would have been appointed. It just made more sense for him to be the nominee in that sense, as opposed to other sense. And speaking of that other sense, we need to acknowledge this. What Trump also needs is to find, because Trump is having a little bit of a problem in this election. As we've seen, Trump has leaned very heavily into his base for this election. Basically bordering on QAnon stuff. But he also needs to try and find a way to broaden his audience. He needs to get people who are not in his base. And he has to do something in that regard. And that's why some of these names are in the race. Like, Marco Rubio. Like, do you really think he would have chosen fucking Marco Rubio in 2016? Or 2020? No. But he also has to make sure they're not too egregious that they'll turn off his base. I mean, the base even went so far as to be turned up by Stefanik because she voted for this FISA bill. Like, I mean, he needs to find someone who can appeal to them, but also, like, get people to join in his little coalition. And that's why certain people like Nikki Haley are in contention. Even though many conservatives actually openly touted the idea of having Nikki Haley as Trump's VP. In order to find someone, they need someone, like, think about it. They need someone who is younger than Trump, obviously. They need someone who is a minority. They need someone who appeals to Trump's base, but also kind of broadens it to an extent. They need someone who doesn't have any, like, current obligations to do. They need someone who is reliable to the Trump campaign in that regard. They need someone who can rile up a crowd. In that token, Tulsi's the only person who fits all of those things. And again, like, I wouldn't have seen this as an option even like a year ago. Even a year ago where people said, like, oh, Tulsi's going to get in the Republican nomination. It's like, I thought that would be stupid. Like, I mean, if you would have asked me a while ago, if you would have asked me in 2020, who do you think Trump would try to choose for 2024 VP nominee? I would have said someone like Ron DeSantis. And maybe like a year or two afterwards, I would have said something like a fucking Marjorie Taylor Greene. Maybe during the fucking primaries, I would have said like Vivek. I was even afraid that he was going to pick fucking Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just to like completely go full on into the QAnon nonsense. Hell, I would have probably just like randomly said one of these other names just because it would have made probably more logistical sense. But as I just keep looking at it over and over and over again, it just makes too much sense for Tulsi to be the nominee. Like, I mean, it would be cool if, like, Trump, like, just didn't understand any of this and just picked someone, like, just completely turn off everything. That would be amazing. But unfortunately, I think that there's some people that there's going to be enough, like stupidity in there that's going to work around to this answer. Now, let me go bit by bit why I think so. Now, the first thing that I will say is something that you might actually say would work against her. One of the big things that Trump has been trying to use as a way to try and get people to join his campaign is loyalty. Like, he's been trying to find loyal people. That's one of the big things. Apparently, that's one of the top issues for his campaign. He's looking for loyalty. And many people might argue, okay, but like, wouldn't that immediately eliminate Tulsi? Because she spent her career being critical of Trump. She's, like, voted against a lot of his bills in Congress. She voted for his impeachment, like the most recent impeachment inquiry against Trump. Like, I mean, of the people on the short list, she's not exactly the most loyal, so why is she there? But that was before. You see, Trump's a little bit, he's got a little bit of a weird sense of what this loyalty thing is, because some of the people who he considers now the most loyal to him are people who at one point were the most critical of him. Mike Lee, again, used to be very critical of Trump. A lot of these people used to be very critical of Trump, but now they're like super loyal to him, and now he treats them like their family. Well, he treats them like their property, but like, you know. And Tulsi has always had this small hint of loyalty. Like, remember, she voted against Trump's first impeachment by voting present, which essentially said that I will wipe my hand clean of the affair. In 2020, she exclusively backed Trump-backed candidates. Like, she exclusively tackled them. Like, most recently, she's been extremely critical of the Democratic Party. Like, she's been rallying really hard against the Democrats in the most recent election, and has basically been soft praising Trump on a lot of regards. She's trying to prove herself to be really, really loyal in this most recent years. But a lot of you might be wondering, like, but come on. Like, I mean, come on. Like, really? Do you really think that his base would support her as the vice presidential nominee? Are you crazy? His fucking base loves her. His base loves Tulsi Gabbard. And when I say his base loves Tulsi Gabbard, I mean, like, all of the factions of his base love Tulsi Gabbard. David Duke and Nick Fuentes, they fucking love Tulsi. Nick Fuentes, during the entire 2020 election, his whole shtick, one of his shticks was literally Mommy Tulsi Gabbard. Like, like current people who are jumping into his like ship, Freedom Tunes, Tim Pool, Joe Rogan. Like these people, they're all like fans of Tulsi. The fucking MAGA communists were birthed from the Tulsi Gabbard movement. And like this base fucking loves her. Why? Because she's an isolationist. She loves weed. I don't know why, but for some reason, like, there's this new generation of conservatives that just fucking loves weed. Even though it's like they support the party that, again, overwhelmingly is against marijuana legalization, and they're supporting a president who spent 4 fucking years not legalizing weed, but they love weed, apparently. She hates gay people. They hate gay people. She's bought by every single fascist overseas. They love every single fascist overseas and watch people who are bought by them, too. They have those really weird connections to Russia where it's like, oh, that's weird. Why did this Russian official meet with Trump's campaign? That's kind of weird. Oh, why did Tulsi Gabbard, like, get this money from, like, a Russian oligarch? That's so weird. That's crazy. Shh, don't look at it, though. It's a conspiracy theory. Shh. She's also a vet. Republicans fucking cum themselves every day the second you bring up anything related to veterans. Unless you want to talk about, like, veterans healthcare, in which case, they don't like that. They don't like that. When a veteran also says something that disagrees with everything they say, they don't like that either. Oh yeah, but she's isolationist, but like that special kind of isolationist. Like, because there's a lot of things that people don't understand about isolationism versus like other like not like non-interventionism or like pacifism based foreign policy. Like like isolationism is really just like America, like really like isolationism doesn't even really necessarily oppose U.S. intervention overseas. That's kind of fucking weird. Like, Trump has shifted the like foreign policy of the GOP to seemingly be borderline isolationist, and yet for some reason they'll still have people like openly talking about invading Mexico. Tom Cotton is one of Trump's biggest ardent supporters, and he's a full-fledged neocon. Tulsi has huge allyships with many other Republican officials, like Dan Crenshaw, so she has the in-roots already within the Republican Party. So basically just her not saying she's Republican is basically just her not admitting the truth. Trump and Tulsi also already have some sort of strange closeness. Like, remember in 2020 when Tulsi Gabbard was accused by Hillary Clinton of being like a Russian asset? And then Trump went on Fox News and defended Tulsi Gabbard's legacy? And also coincidentally defended Jill Stein? In that like ploy to try and get people who liked them to like him? And he's maybe what if he wants to go one step further? Another fact that many people have pointed out is the fact that Tulsi Gabbard is credited with ending Kamala Harris's bid in 2020 due to her confronting her on the debate stage. Many people are arguing the fact, again, why wouldn't she want to do it a second time? Bring Tulsi Gabbard back and then have her debate Kamala Harris on the general election debate stage. Especially especially or like if she doesn't want to debate Biden directly. Another advantage that Tulsi has is she has inroads with indie media. Like, I mean, all these fucking indie media people, like, say the word and she'll appear on fucking Jimmy Dore's show and then just tout Trump 2024 and then his whole audience will just automatically just jump on Trump 2024. She also already has connections to trying to like make Trump win. She was floated as a potential running mate for Bobby Kennedy Jr. And he openly stated, like, it was very recently stated that by one of his staffers, like, literally his bid is intentionally to try and hurt Biden's chance of re-election. And she also, quote unquote, checks a pivot. Like, she is seemingly a pivot for Trump's candidacy. He's picking a former Democrat to be his running mate. He can tout that as, like, I'm running a unity campaign. He can tout that as, look, she's a woman of color. I'm trying to move forward the next generation of our people, or blah, blah, blah. Back to the intermediate point, because I was rambling. Joe Rogan. Trump has been trying to get on Joe Rogan for a long period of time. But Joe Rogan has refused to have Trump on the thing. Who has he had a lot on the show? Tulsi Gabbard. Maybe she goes on his show and touts pro-Trump 2020 stuff? Or maybe she can talk to Joe and maybe get Trump to be on the show. And that would be a very big thing. That would get a lot of people to vote for Trump. And one of the biggest points that really kind of solidifies that this seems to be making sense is the fact that Tulsi is very actively trying to get the nomination. Like, she's, in the most literal sense, trying with every fiber of her being to get on all the right things to get on Trump's radar to be the VP. Like, unlike Scott, like, because Tim Scott also has some people floating around to try and get him the vice presidential slot, but his is a bit more subtle. Like, his is the more traditional approach. You don't actively seek the vice presidency. You get your name put on a list, and then you get interviewed by the person who's trying to run. Meanwhile, Tulsi keeps going on all these conservative-leaning shows who keep asking her, hey, want to be the VP nominee? You should run for the VP nomination. And she goes, oh, well, I mean, if Trump wants me to do it, I mean, I'll do it. She was on Don Trump Jr.'s show. And then when he asked her, hey, if my dad hit you up and said, do you want to be his running mate? She said that she would be gracious in accepting the nomination. Not that long ago, Tucker Carlson, who, remember, his whole shtick when he first started going on Twitter was he invited Trump on Twitter to give an interview. He brought Tulsi on and said she might be the vice president. Why don't she tell you what she stands for and blah, blah, blah. I don't necessarily know if, like, she is courting for the Trump's nomination or if they've already accepted that she's going to be the nominee and they're using this as a mediator to gauge audience response. Either way, it makes sense to me. Like, I honestly just can't see any of this going on and then not automatically assume that she's just going to be the nominee. I mean, it just makes the most sense, logistically. Which hopefully means that Trump is on the complete opposite side of this and is stupid and picks someone completely out of left field that nobody wants. And this is just really fucking surreal. Because this means a lot of different things at once. Like, this means that he might actually even be going so far to try and actively court the MAGA communists. Like, I mean, this is it's just weird that this makes sense that he's trying to court the MAGA communists. It's very weird. Like, they'll support them even though like that ticket, like, just unilaterally support. This is just so fucking weird. I don't understand how certain, like, members of the Trump movement make sense with, like, fucking MAGA communists that all just fucking hate Jews and hate Israel and want Israel to, like, be bombed out of existence. But then on the same token, they'll support fucking Trump, who literally just sucks BB's cock every day. And then Tulsi is, like, getting the lip gloss, like, my turn next. Anyways, that's basically all I have to say on that subject. Yeah, I 100%, I would bet, if I had money, I would bet that Tulsi Gabbard would be the nominee come 2024. Hopefully she'll never be anywhere close to the vice presidency. Again, a thing I never thought that I would say, because I remember back in the day when I used to be one of those Bernie Gabbard people, but things change, and things sure did change. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go on my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.